Welcome to Modern Management of the Older Adult, brought to you by the Institute of Clinical Excellence.
Hey crew, this is Shelby Blankenship, one of your physical therapy TAs for the older adult division, and today we are going to be talking about how to train to be able to travel. So as probably a lot of you are aware, I love to travel, and one of the things that I think a lot of our older adults, they save all this time, all this money, especially when it gets to retirement, and they want to travel. They want to go to cool places, whether that is places out west, whether that's places with some uneven ground. Maybe they do like to do some hiking. Maybe it's even as far as doing like European travel, especially like some of the river cruises and all those kinds of things, which are super, super cool. So what I want to talk about is how can we make sure to train our folks up so that they feel not only super confident in doing those aspects, but that they will actually like book the trip, go with their family, make memories. And one of the things that I think people miss a lot is it's not as simple as just like gait training. It's not as simple as just being able to purely lift heavy. It's being able to combine all those different movements, especially when you're having to navigate multiple avenues. So when I think about like European travel, it's not just, can I walk a long distance? It's, can I walk through the airport with my backpack on? Can I walk up to the, stand in long lines sometimes to be able to get on the airplane and then be able to take my luggage and get it into a lower bin or get it into the overhead bin and then be able to sit for long periods of time and then, move on from there. And so here are probably about 5 exercises that I recommend people really working on to make sure you're addressing all those aspects, but trying to combine them into like a circuit or an AMRAP style or a home exercise program if that time is allotted for them. So the first one that I think we need to address is suitcase carries and suitcase step-ups. So especially like I just came back from a European travel with my in-laws and we had to do a ton of suitcase carries. Especially if you go to Europe, you better be able to handle your own luggage. And especially if you're having to navigate like the metro system or any type of like Eurostar or any of those kinds of things, you've got to be able to handle your own luggage. And it can become very daunting if only maybe a couple of the individuals on the trip can handle the luggage themselves. That's a lot more things to have to be carried by those 2 individuals, and that everybody else kind of feels like bad, obviously, because that's a lot of work. And so with the suitcase carries, I recommend they need to be above the threshold that they're going to carry. Most of the time, I would say most people's carry-ons can be anywhere from like 20 to 25 pounds, depending on how many pairs of shoes they have in there or anything like that. But most people's like actual suitcases that are not necessarily carry-ons are probably closer to 35 to 40 pounds. And it's not necessarily that they have to be able to hold on to that weight the whole time because they're probably going to be able to roll it. But if they can hold on to it for even like just marches in place, especially like slow marches where they're working more on that single leg stance, that is going to be super helpful. And also constantly being able to pick it up, set it down, and knowing which arm is going to be their dominant arm. And if you're concerned about using, like if their balance is a little bit wonky and you're wanting to make sure they have a railing, they need to be able to do that on one side and then hold the rail on the other and practice that in both settings. So one thing that we do at our clinic is I don't have parallel bars, but I do have a rig. And so I will set up the rig to about what a normal rail height would be. And I will put a barbell there and then I will strap it in so it's nice and tight against the rig. And then I will set up my step up just to the side of it. So they can practice picking up that suitcase. Usually we'll have like a kettlebell set up and then they'll have the opposite hand on the rail. Then they can practice the step ups or just purely walking back and forth with setting it down. That is really probably one of the biggest ones that I've seen that tends to carry on the most as far as exercise go. The next one I think is more, not only probably the second rated, but also a pride thing, is being able to get that suitcase from the ground overhead, especially if carry-on is something that they're wanting to do. So a couple of combinations I will do for this. The sumo deadlift high pull is one of my favorites. Most of the time with a suitcase, you're not going to be in that conventional deadlift position. So you're going to have a little bit of a wider stance so you can get that kind of odd object from the floor to your chest and then from your chest overhead. With the high pull, you're just going to this position. So this is more for like getting your carry-on onto the conveyor belt, like if you're doing like TSA or any of those kinds of things. But the clean and press, so say I do a sumo deadlift high pull, get into more of my clean position, and then I do that press overhead. That's kind of like the carry-on from the sumo deadlift high pull, which can be super helpful to get those things overhead. It's great to practice that in a like a smaller position, as far as using maybe like a couple of dumbbells or even just doing a PVC pipe, because that will really help cue people to keep it nice and close and then press overhead. And then you can go to the dumbbells or even go to a wall ball, which is a little bit more symmetrical to what a suitcase would be, have that high pull, get in that position, and then do that press overhead. Again, if you have the capacity to where you have a 20-pound wall ball and you can work people up to that, all you're going to do is build the confidence. It's not necessarily that they're doing those seated wall balls like we would normally do, where you have a squat and then you press overhead and throw it up the wall. So it's not necessarily that they have to be able to launch it into the air, which would be pretty funny. Probably somebody who is very short would need that to get it in the overhead bin. But for our cases, we're just trying to get that odd object from the floor and then overhead. The next one that I think a lot of people miss is reactive stepping. So especially when things like the metro, and especially in Europe, where it can be a little bit aggressive, whether that's because the people are aggressive or because the doors are aggressive, you need to be able to react quickly to those cues. So, when the doors open and the people come off, like, you have to be able to get yourself on that spot, especially if the door starts ringing and especially if you have a party of people. I unfortunately saw way too many people get their hands slammed in, or unfortunate circumstances where they were kind of either the party had to be split because people didn't get on fast enough, or those kinds of things. And especially in those situations, like, we want to create as much independence as possible. So with reactive stepping, you can start simply with doing like a clock yourself app, or doing like the Blaze pods where they're having to step in those different directions quickly. But you can also do it where you're using something like a treadmill and have it at a very slow speed, and they practice getting off the back of the treadmill or stepping onto the back of the treadmill, depending on if you have one that can go both directions or if it's using a motor. And those kinds of things can kind of help them go from like a very static position to a mobile position, not only from them moving, but something else is moving underneath them. That tends to kind of freak some people out. And so if they can practice it in a very controlled environment in your clinic, that's a great one to practice. And it also kind of gives them a little bit more confidence in making sure that they can navigate not only getting on and off metro, but especially if there's a lot of escalators or those moving walkways you see a lot in the airport. The last one that I want to talk about is uneven ambulation. So one of the things that you'll see, you're going to want to make sure that you practice cobblestones or steps that are uneven. And so one of the ways that we do this at our clinic is we will take a lot of ab mats. If you're not, I haven't seen an ab mat before, it is flat and then it has like this little hump and it kind of goes down like so. It's used for obviously ab mat sit-ups to kind of get a little bit more extension. But what's nice about it is depending on which way you set it, it can be a squishier surface or an uneven surface. So if you have it where the flat side is down, it tends to be a little bit squishy and it kind of makes that foot rock and roll a little bit more. If you flip it upside down, it looks flat, but it is uneven. So it's both ways you can practice. One of the ways we will have it set up is we will do multiple spots of the ab mats, and then at the very end, we do a long piece of foam that feels almost more like quicksand, so to speak, so that people have to practice getting their feet up and practice that just change in position of what their feet feel like underneath them. Another way that you can do this is adding in multiple step heights. So the way we do that here is I've got different box heights, but I also have lots of different plates, and they have different sizes correlated to their weight. So I will have different stacks of those, and even sometimes we'll put the mat over top of them so they can't see it. Besides obviously like that something looks uneven, and then they have to navigate that. The uneven side of it, obviously what we don't want for people is when they get over there, they're like, oh man, like I got my suitcase here, I got myself here, and now they start ambulating and exploring, and then they have a slip, trip, or fall because of the uneven. We want to make sure that we're training that and making them feel really confident in navigating that, especially if we can add load to it. We don't want them to just navigate, hands-free, nothing attached to their body. We might want to add in a weighted vest. We might to add in a backpack, a suitcase carry, like we talked about earlier, because a lot of time they might be having shopping bags. They might be holding a little kid's hand. They might be doing all these kinds of things. And we want to make sure that they feel set up for success. So when it comes to travel, it can be super daunting for some of our folks, but it is a huge, huge goal. And we want to make sure they're set up. And that is something that we can do not only in the PT, OT realm, but also on the fitness side. So make sure to add these types of exercises into your routine. It is not only good for travel, but of course, obviously for just regular functional activities they have to do in their home, but set them up for success. Make sure you're overloading them so that when they go to do the actual task during travel, it feels a cinch. We want this to be easy for them in the real world so we can make it hard in the clinic so it's super easy for them. As far as next steps for classes that Older Adult Division has coming up, Live has one coming up this weekend. It is October 18th in Salt Lake City. November 8th, we're going to be in Oviedo, Florida. And then November 15th, we are going to be in Georgetown, Kentucky. As far as L1 goes, we are going to be starting that back up October 22nd. And then L2 is currently going on, and the next cohort starts February 9th. Hopefully this was helpful for you, and we hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you for listening to the MMOA podcast. If you found this helpful, please share with someone that could benefit. And if you're looking for more practical content to help you better serve older adults, head over to www.mmoa.online, where you can learn more about our free resources, our community, continuing education courses, and our certification. Once again, that's www.mmoa.online. Thanks for listening.